Welcome to Talks with Summer, seeing the world through the eyes of another, stories of love and loss. Today I have with me Michael Linke. Michael grew up in Sydney. Born with severe vision impairment, he attended specialist schools but was never treated as different at home, a philosophy instilled by parents who believed in self-determination above all else. He built a career spanning senior executive roles, including serving as CEO of the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and has spent much of his adult life in Canberra with his wife, Mardi. An avid photographer and blogger, Michael has learned that a camera allows him to see far more than his eyes alone ever could. His first book, Dear Mum, written in the weeks following his mother's death, is the story of a mother and son and a kind of love that reveals its full weight only once it is gone. Thank you so much for coming today, Michael. It is my honor. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Summer. It's a real pleasure to talk to you and be part of your stream here and your channel here. Well, you've sort of summed it up. I was born in Sydney back in the 60s, so a long time ago. It was a fairly rough area. We were brought up in inner Sydney. There was a lot of Indigenous conflict at the time. My father was a publican and he ran hotels, so lots of drinking, lots of smoking. So I was exposed to a lot of sort of vices in life very early, lots of gambling. So some people say it's astounding that I grew up to become a CEO after being exposed to that type of early childhood, but it was a very wholesome upbringing with mum and dad and three brothers. So there was four of us in total, me and my three brothers. And we had a fantastic time growing up, experiencing, the real world, I suppose, in Sydney in the 60s and 70s before we moved to a nice bungalow in the suburbs in Sydney and continued to play, cricket and football in the backyard and swim in the backyard pool when Dad finally, got out of pubs and realised that lifestyle wasn't a lifestyle that he wanted to follow. So we grew up in that. And then when I got married early, I left home at about 19 years old, 20 years old, and started to experience and explore the world. So that's how sort of life started for me.
Is there any incident which you would like to share that shaped your life in a meaningful way?
There's no one specific incident, but I think the thread in my life was my parents, and specifically my mother, not allowing my eyesight to get in the way. One incident that comes back to me is we were playing cricket in the backyard one day, and another person, a friend, threw a cricket bat at me and knocked out one of my teeth. And Mum runs down, and instead of going mad at the person, she said to everybody, "Stop, let's find the tooth." And she pushed the tooth straight back into my mouth, as unhygienic as that is. But that was her attitude, just keep going. And that incident is replayed time and time again in my life. When something happened, when there was a little bit of adversity, Mum said or Dad said, pick up your boots, pull up your bootstraps, and let's just keep going. So that's something that's really formed my view in how to live life, that despite some adversity or when things don't go your way, just, stiff upper lip, pull your bootstraps up and keep going. And I've got a number of instances like that, from teeth to getting hit in the head with a rock, as you read in my book. And again, Mum was always there saying, let's just patch you up and keep going.
And can you share a little bit with our listeners more about your vision and what's a little bit more about what exactly is going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born with enlarged retinas, or what's called enlarged eyes. So most people's eyes are spherical in shape or a ball shape. My eyes are egg shaped, so they're much bigger than the natural human eye, which changes the pressure in the eye and also causes a lot of damage at the back of both of my eyes in terms of rods and cones and retinal damage. So my right eye has no sight whatsoever. It was completely dysfunctional when I was born, and my left eye has about 5% vision. So what I say to people is, if you can see 60 metres, you can see something in the distance at 60 metres. I need to be 1 metre away from that to get the same level of detail that you would get at 60 metres. So it's very very poor. I've never driven. I can't read text. I trip over things from time to time. I walk past my wife in the shops and she gets great joy in walking past me sometimes. We have a really cool relationship with mucking around with my eyesight. And then 10 years ago or 12 years ago now in New York, I suffered a detached retina in my good eye, my left eye, and that took some more vision away from me. So that 60 metres now is about 10 centimetres or 15 centimetres. So it's very deteriorated in my left eye following that detached retina. But I was lucky. I was in New York. As one of the world's leading retinal surgeons was there, and he was able to restore my sight. Otherwise, I would have been totally blind.
Thank you so much for sharing, Michael. Who has been the most influential person in your life and how have they impacted you?
It's a difficult one because there's a lot of people that have structured and shaped my life. You know, my parents were influential, but I think the most influential person right now is or who has been is my wife of 27 years, Marty. She is really similar to my mother in, you know, that stiff upper lip, just keep going. When adversity comes your way, just, you know, get stuck in and keep doing it. A little bit of tough love from time to time. And I've needed that from time to time. So she has really influenced that and continued that outlook to work hard. She hasn't mollycoddled me. She hasn't wrapped me up in cotton wool. She's just said, you know, we're together. We love each other. We've got a wonderful life. And despite what happened in New York, which she was there with me when that happened, and despite the other traumas that we'll talk about today that I've experienced, she's been there and she's really influenced my attitude. She was the one that inspired me to write the book. So significant influence in my life.
Yes, and I might be jumping the gun a little bit, but I feel compelled to ask you that you've suffered from your story, the little bit I know and the little bit my sister told me, you've suffered from so many setbacks, and there's so many things that happened in your life, including your vision thing. So what is that one thing which has always motivated you or made you keep on going on?
It's that drive, I suppose, and Dad instilled that in us, that hard work. He always worked hard in the pub, and then when he left the pub in driving trucks around, he was a truck driver after he left the pub, and he was up at 4 o'clock in the morning, working 6 days a week, and we always saw that as brothers, and I always saw that, and I always knew that I had to work harder than the next person because of my eyesight. It took me longer to do things. So that sense of hard work and achievement is something that has always driven me. And I think that was instilled by my parents, instilled by Marty. And I try and instill that in others, that you have to work really hard to get anywhere. And I think
yes.
that hard work, and you know what it's like running a YouTube channel. It's there's a lot of hard work that you need to put in to get success and see success in those things. So I'm thankful that I've had a little bit of success, but it's because that attitude that I've always had is, you know, don't give up in the face of adversity. You have to keep going, despite what surrounds you. You can't give up. And if you crumble and give up, you end up in a puddle on the floor and curled up in a corner in a house somewhere, and you're not adding value to society, you're not adding value to yourself or your loved ones or your friends. So you just need to keep going sometimes.
Thank you so much for sharing. Can you share a moment of love in your life that has stayed with you?
Absolutely. And it was in New York in 2013 when I had a detached retina. You know, we were on a holiday. It was our 4th trip to New York. We fell in love with New York in 2010. We loved going there for a month every year, just living like New Yorkers, putting on our jackets and our gloves and our hats like New Yorkers do, and just really experiencing that. So this was a holiday of a lifetime for us. But 3 or 4 days into the holiday, I had a detached retina, and I thought, I've ruined our holiday. I'm going to sit in hospital or sit in the hotel room for weeks now. I can't see. And Marty, again, was just, no, we'll just work through it. So what? You've got a detached retina. We'll go and see the doctor. We've got the best retinal surgeon in the world. Let's go and see him. And she sat up all night that first night talking to banks in Australia, because as you know, expensive medical costs in America. It was a very expensive surgery. And Marty had to do a lot of work talking to banks in Australia, talking to our mortgage broker, talking to the hospital. And it was just an absolute demonstration of devoted love. She put her life on hold. She put our holiday on hold to make sure that I could survive, I could get through this, and I could get my eyesight restored. And then the next 2 weeks during recovery, we went back to the doctor every second day. I was on multiple medications for my eye to maintain my eye condition after that was out. We couldn't do any sightseeing. We couldn't go out to restaurants. We couldn't, do anything. Essentially, it was go to Central Park, sit on a bench with my head down like this for 14 days. And she was by my side every second of the way. And to me, that's absolute devotion and love, and I'm forever grateful for what she did. And we've been back to New York a number of times and really continue to enjoy visiting New York.
And it makes me feel that sometimes, however we believe in the higher power, God or whoever, but we are often dealt so many hardships, but there's always blessings too. And I can tell, I can almost feel it very deeply how much love Marty carries for you and in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Have you experienced a loss that has changed you in a profound way?
Absolutely, yes. Read my book. Two losses, and the two very interesting losses. Both my parents, and the loss was so different. And I really like to talk about this. So my mother died in 2017. She had a stroke. She was 82. And I describe it now as she died in a beautiful way because there was no pain or suffering for her. She just had a stroke at home. She was rushed to hospital. And for the next 36 hours, as her brain slowly deteriorated, she passed away. And she was in no pain. And she was able to have her family around her, her husband, my dad, myself and my three brothers were there, aunties and uncles and, brothers and sisters of hers and family members all were able to come in and say goodbye to her in a beautiful way. And she just slipped into, a permanent sleep and left us. And that profoundly impacted. It was the first time that my brothers and I had faced grief and death so close to our family. We'd lost uncles and aunties in the past and grandparents. Obviously, I was very young when my grandparents died, so I'd never really experienced a close death in the family. And that had a profound impact on me, and the sadness was just immense. But 8 years later, my father, after a short illness in hospital once, when he came home one night, committed suicide. And that death was completely different to my mother's. Where my mother's was a beautiful, peaceful death, my father's was so barbaric and so traumatic. The grief process was very different, and I experienced grief in a very, very different way to when my father died. I was so angry and resentful of what he did, and where mum, it was just beautiful, and she'd had a great life and she'd served us so well and raised 4 beautiful boys, where dad had just undone and betrayed us in everything that he'd spoken to us about, hard work in the face of adversity and soldiering on and doing all the things that you need to do to build a great life. And then for him to take his life was just so foreign to us. And there must have been mental health. There must have been some other issue there. We'll never know and we'll never understand why he did it. But it was just completely different. And both those deaths had such a impact on me and my outlook in life in that regard. And they're just so different to the way they happened.
How has grief shown up in your life over time after these experiences?
Yeah, well, grief with mum showed up. And again, Marty played a critical role because all I wanted to do was talk to mum. When mum died in 2017, it was just, I want to talk to her. I bring her every couple of days. We talk often. We talk about the football. We talk about the family. We talk about work. We talk about, what she's going through and what she's doing with dad and stuff like that, and the grandchildren and the great nieces and all those people growing up. And I didn't have that opportunity to talk to her after she died. So Marty said, well, just go and talk to her. So I went out one day and started talking to her. And then those thoughts turned into writing. Those thoughts turned into writing. And ultimately, the book presented itself, and it was a really great way for me to deal with grief. So whenever I felt a grief process happening in the months after her death, I turned to writing, and that allowed me to deal with it. When Dad died, grief showed up in a different way. I was very angry, and my brothers and I all treated it differently and worked with it differently. I went to a counsellor and I got some serious counselling to deal with what he'd done. One of my brothers stuck his head in the sand. Another brother just refused to believe it happened. And another brother lived in the house where dad, committed suicide, and he relived it every day. He'd ring me up every day. Oh, I can still see dad doing this. I can still see this. I can still feel that. So it really showed up in different ways for me personally and for my brothers, where mum's death was a unifying process for the four of us. We came together as really good brothers, but dad's death was almost divisive for us as brothers and caused a little grief and a bit of angst, given the way that he did it. So I've really experienced sort of the spectrum of grief in that, which is, for me, it's been fairly profound, and it's allowed me to really look inwardly and understand more about myself and more about the world and what's going on in that regard. So where I don't wish for those experiences on everyone, they have certainly had an impact on me and allowed me to look at the world differently. You've got to get out. You've got to enjoy the world. Life is short. As my mother used to say, you're dead for a very long time. So experience it, enjoy it, and really get out and live life to the fullest.
As you were speaking, it brought up so many ways I connected to it, because I think I went through two losses in a short span of time. And a couple of things which came to my mind was that, first of all, the fact that when you lose someone and then you lose someone again in a short period of time after that, I think processing that, feeling that, and how to go about it, it changes everything. I would often feel sad for my mother, then I would feel sad for my brother, then I would feel, but why am I not feeling sad about my mother at this moment? So it was all this confusion going on. And the other thing which also came to my mind is the relationship we have with the person also makes a difference. I was close to my mother too, like you were saying. I completely resonated with that. I would call her in the morning, at night, for every little thing, text her for everything. And one fine day, it completely ended out of the blue. So it's also, loss is one thing, but the shock and the acceptance that the reality has suddenly flipped into something else is another factor which our brains and our bodies do not accept immediately.
Yeah, well, there's no book, there's no instruction manual on it. We all lose parents, and the natural order of the world is that we should use our parents before we lose, in your case, your brother. It's a devastating loss, and I feel for you. But we all lose a parent, but we all grieve differently, and we don't know when that time is going to come. We could be in our 20s, we could be in our 60s or 70s or 50s, as I was when my parents died in my 50s. So I still got a lot of life ahead of me. So it's fairly early to lose your parents. And as you said, depending on the connection with the individual, I had different relationship with my mother and father, and they were different people. Mum was very loving and very open about that, and very sensitive, where dad was, this tough, hard-nosed, blue-collar worker that, grew up in the rough and tumble of Sydney in the 40s and 50s. So no emotion, don't show emotion as boys. Got to be tough boys on the sporting field, and if you fall over and crack a knee or crack your head, just get up and keep going. So he was very different to mum, who was very loving and nurturing in that way. So the grief process is different, and obviously the way they died, and in your case, your mother and your brother dying in different manners, brings out grief in different ways. And then you get that guilt. Should I grieve for this person more than this person? And how dare I grieve for my mother and not my brother? Or how dare I grieve for my father or my mother? Or I don't grieve for my father because of what he did. I felt guilty sometimes, or I've been angry with him. Well, why should I be angry? He must have been in absolute purgatory. He must have been in such a dark place to do what he did, knowing the impact that it would have on his four boys. So am I right to feel angry with him? But from time to time I get angry with him and I yell and scream at him. So it's a very interesting emotion. And that's probably why I turned my notes into a book. I thought everyone's got to deal with this, and we deal with it differently. If I could share my story and others benefit from it, well, then why not share that story? Don't be coy about it and don't hide it. And I think we hide these emotions too much sometimes, and we don't talk about them openly. And I think society needs to develop, or we can talk about suicide, we can talk about death of a parent, we can talk about grief and vulnerability. And I'd really hope that we can evolve to talk about these things a little bit more.
I felt after I lost my mother first, because with our parents, it's chances are that we are all going to see our if things are untimely, that's another story in like with my brother, but we are all going to see our parents' losses in our lives. And it made me wonder after losing my mom that I would push that reality and the thought away from my mind. I did not want to consider it. And when it actually happened, it all became real and it hit home. And I became that person which would talk to people, or if someone was a little unwell, to sort of bring up this topic, and it's something which we should be comfortable talking about. It's not, it's like, I think I did an interview long back with someone who had written a book on grief, and they had said they had put it in a very nice way, that talking about death is not going to bring it sooner.
No, exactly. Yeah, that's a great statement. That's a great statement.
Yes.
You know, it's going to happen to all of us at some point.
Yes.
So, prepare for it. And you don't need to over prepare and, do a whole range of things that some people suggest. You don't need to be silly about it, but you need to think about it. And I know my parents did. There's letters that we received from mum after her death where she was thinking about it 5-10 years earlier, saying that, this is what I want you to do, and I want you to be good to each other as brothers and look after the grandchildren and things like that. So mum and dad certainly thought about it and put pen to paper a couple of times. And there was 7 letters from dad that we found during the investigation after his suicide. None of them were suicide notes, sadly, so we didn't understand why he did it. But we could see over the course of 5 or 6 years since mum died what he was writing about and what he was feeling and what he wanted his sons to experience after he was gone. So that, in a way, showed a little bit of preparation and a bit of foresight in talking about death. But they didn't do it publicly, and I think we need to do it publicly. Writing private letters is great and might be good for your soul.
Yes.
But for your family and those around you, it's much better, I think, to have those conversations and start talking about it a little bit more openly.
Yes, and if you're comfortable, I think you might have it in your book. Would you also share with our listeners how your father committed suicide?
Yeah, I'm willing to share that. So he was in hospital for a few weeks, about 3 or 4 weeks beforehand, and we were all called by the doctors to come to hospital and see him because he was suffering from emphysema and fibroids in his lungs, and he was probably going to die from pneumonia or COVID in hospital. So we visited him in hospital one night and said our goodbyes, and we thought he would pass away that night. And the next day we go to hospital expecting the doctors to tell us that the worst had happened, and he was sitting up in bed having breakfast, basically like, "Hi, I'm perfectly fine." And we've gone, "Hang on a sec, what's going on here? You're supposed to die overnight." "Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm all right." And he spent the next 2 or 3 weeks in hospital convalescing and recovering from pneumonia. And then we were all excited when the doctor said, "Well, he can go home." And we thought, "Oh, fantastic. We'll get some support for him at home. He's very elderly. Let's get a nursing support in and tap into some of the systems that Australia has for people living at home who are elderly." And he went home at about 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. And about 9 hours later, he takes himself out of bed and goes outside to the backyard and sets himself on fire, which is a horrendous and terrible thing to do. But he found some petrol and set himself on fire in the most horrific way. And over the course of the next half an hour, ambulances and police and fire brigade turn up. Of course, my brother was at the house. He was rushed to hospital and essentially was not able to survive that incident and died over the next 12 hours following that horrendous act that he did. And we still can't understand or believe why he did it or how he would do it. There's a number of ways to commit suicide, and I'm sure that type of act is possibly one of the worst, self-immolation. So it's a devastating thing to do, and it's really devastated me and my 3 brothers the way he did it.
Thank you so much for sharing, Michael. I can just say that I can picture how painful and horrible it must have been for you and your brothers.
It was very difficult time for the 4 of us, especially with one of my brothers living in the house where Dad did it, as I said earlier. it wasn't very pleasant to find that and have to ring the authorities to deal with it. So a very difficult time, and not my father at all. As I said, my father was such, a vigilante for hard work and wanted people to do the right thing and live life well and, always do the right thing. A very good sense of values and ethics and morals in my father. So it was completely out of character. And I just don't think we'll ever have an answer to the why. We just need to accept that that's what he did. That's his choice. As you know, I'm a libertarian, and if people want to choose different paths in life, allow them to do that. But it's certainly not a very pleasant way to end your life at all.
And he never said anything. There was never any indication.
No indication at all. We talked about voluntary assisted suicide and voluntary assisted dying in hospitals. That's legal in the state that he lived in, New South Wales. And he said, no, not interested. I want to go home. I want to be in my house. I want to be with my boys. And we thought, he was recovered, and we thought he would go home and live out his days comfortably at home. But no, he took a different path. So it was a surprise to all of us. The speed at which he did it, 9 hours after getting home from hospital, was a surprise and shock to all of us.
And was this the house where he and your mother stayed together?
Yes, yeah, that was the family home that they'd been since 1980, 81, a long time. Yeah, 40 odd years, almost 50 years in that house. Yeah.
What surprised you most about the experience of loss?
The surprise that I suppose I got was how sad I was around my mother. It was just this real deep sadness that I'd never experienced in my life. And that, I knew I'd be sad when she died, but when she did, the blanket of sadness hanging over me at that time was terrible. And then with my father, it wasn't so much grief as a blanket of, anger and uncertainty. So there's a couple of things that have surprised me in that, because I didn't feel as sad following my father's death because of the way he did it. And, we'd seen mum died, and we knew that dad was getting old and his time would come. So I think you prepare yourself for that when your parents are getting elderly. So that surprised me a little bit. But the depth of sadness with mum and the joy I felt at the same time. I know it's a difficult concept, and it's probably a juxtaposition to say you're grieving but you're feeling joy at the same time. Writing the book brought me joy because I was able to relive all those moments in my life that mum was part of, from going to school and growing up and playing sport and travelling and getting married. All the experiences that I had, I could relive and write them down, and they're now forever. It's not a memory that I've got anymore. It's actually in print, in black and white on a page. And I can share that now with my nieces and nephews, with my grandnieces and nephews, and they'll get a little picture into, a time in my life when I suffered tremendous grief, and hopefully it prepares them and assists them in a way.
How do you stay connected to the people you have lost, your parents?
I've got an antique bird cage with a bird in it that is powered by a little musical bell underneath. And in moments during the year that are important to my parents and to me, so their birthdays, their anniversary, Christmas, other holidays that we celebrate, I wind the bird up and it chirps away and plays a beautiful song and a beautiful tune, and it allows me to think about mum and think about dad in a beautiful way. But it's something that is a ritual for me, I suppose. It's a little ritual that I follow. So on the 19th of November, their anniversary, or the 25th of October, mum's birthday, or the 8th of June, dad's birthday, I will play a little tune with this air-powered antique that mum had. It's a family heirloom. Mum promised it to me when she died. It's sitting on my mantelpiece here at home in a very proud spot at home. And I pull it out 3 or 4 times a year and just experience the joy of a little bird song from a device that's probably 150, 160 years old. So it's a very delicate, old antique that I really enjoy listening to 3 or 4 times a year.
What advice would you offer to someone going through loss and grief?
you can't go around grief. Some people try and bypass it and go, oh, I'll get over it, or go around it, or go over it, or push it down and hide it. And I've seen that in my brothers. But the best advice I can give is you've got to go through it. You've got to lean into it and just work through the process. It is a process, and there's classical steps of grief that counsellors will tell you about. Don't necessarily worry about those classical steps, because people experience them differently in different time frames and different styles. But know that it is a process. Grief is a process. And people say, move on from it. I don't think you move on from it. I think you move through it, and you start to live with it and accept it, and it becomes part of who you are. So it's another sort of badge or another scar, just like falling over or losing a tooth. Mum's death is a scar, and dad's death is a scar. I actually got a tattoo as a result of dad's death, so I've got a permanent scar that reminds me of my father. Yeah, the best advice is just work through it. Let it wash over you. Cry, be happy, be sad, do all the things that your body is telling you to do, and just live through it. It will get better, but yeah, you'll never forget the moment, and you'll never not grieve a close loss again. You'll always grieve that loss, but it just manifests itself differently over time.
One thing which came to my mind is I always ask people who are going through grief and loss, who've lost people, is that I'm from the Indian culture, and this makes me curious always. And I believe in an afterlife, in the soul, in eternal life, and like we're going to unite one day or meet one day. So I'm always very curious to know what your belief is or your take is on this, because it gives me great comfort to know that although not physically with me, that they're still there, and we're going to in essence meet one day. So I'm very curious to know how you see this reality and what your belief system is.
Yeah. It's a very interesting question, because we all have different beliefs, and I respect everyone's beliefs. I've just been to Egypt in January, and their fascination and belief of the afterlife is carved in every temple in Egypt, and you can see the deep passion that the Egyptians had, 4, 5, 6,000 years ago about an afterlife. So, it's a common thread in people of faith, whether Indian as yourself, or Egyptian or Muslim, irrespective of your faith, people have this connection with an afterlife. I for one, don't share those beliefs, but I'm deeply interested in them, which is why I went to Egypt. I wanted to learn about the views of Egyptians on the afterlife. But my view is that people live on in your heart and mind, and that is their essence, and you will continue to pass that on through books, through stories, through history. So I really powerfully talk to my nieces and nephews. They're coming from New Zealand. I've got a niece and nephew flying over from New Zealand next week, and they're spending a couple of days with us here in Canberra, and I will be sharing stories of mum and dad with them to continue mum and dad's story. And I think that's the afterlife that I believe in, that you continue that person's story into others, and then a little bit of them is shared with each generation, so you can continue to talk about them and continue to experience them one day, and that's how they live on. In terms of when I go, I have no views on what will or won't happen to me. It would be nice to think that there is an afterlife and we all meet, but I don't share that view right now. People say to me, one day your views might change, Michael, and I've suffered 2 extreme losses in my life, and my views haven't changed. So I'm not a religious person. I'm not a spiritual person, but I strongly believe in the human ability to deal with grief and to continue to live the lives of those who came before us, through yourself and through those in future generations, to allow those memories and those stories to continue, so that when we do die, we're not forgotten. And I think it's important that we remember who brought us here, who our forebears are, and pass on those stories and those rituals to future generations, so that they can continue to have happy, healthy, wholesome lives. But me, myself, I don't believe in a higher power or a higher being.
In terms of our parents, I've always felt that in fact, our whole family, but our parents are like those two pillars which we are composed of. So I always look at it like that. It's like 50% my mother and 50% my father. And then when one of them or both of them are no longer alive, it feels like the foundation gets shaken for a while.
It does. You become an orphan, and we felt that when my father dies, I realised I was an orphan. All of a sudden, like, oh, hang on a sec, I'm an orphan. 50-year-old orphan with a house, so I don't need to go to an orphanage or places like that. But you can feel for younger people when they lose a parent. But absolutely,
Yes.
part of you go, but biologically they're still in you, and I think that's
Yes.
the important thing. They joined to create you. So part of them is in you, and biologically they're in you, and your children. It's similarly, it's there. The genetic makeup is still there, and physiologically they continue to live. So the definition of an afterlife is there because they will continue to live for eternity in that regard. So that's my view in that space. But yeah, I understand exactly how you feel that you lose that pillar. And we saw two pillars in Egypt, and that reminds me of those two obelisks that were standing, just like parents, a mother and a father, standing tall over the city that we were visiting. And I think, yeah, as if they got knocked down or tumbled, it would be like losing a father or a mother. And the city needs to live on and continue to build and grow.
Yes, and one more thing which came to my mind is I find it almost very beautiful. A beautiful part of grief for me is when I find my mother or my brother within me, and I say something or I do something, or I feel like, oh, that was exactly like her, or he would have acted like that. So it always makes me smile and get connected to them with a lot of love.
Yeah, that's exactly that. That's them living on. That's their afterlife. My wife sees me walking down the street and she goes, "Oh, it's like looking at your father." Walking down the street, because I walk exactly like my father. I'm a bit bow-legged, and it's obvious. Or I say something or do something, and she goes, "Oh, that's your mother talking, isn't it?" So in me, that brings me a lot of joy and a lot of heart,
Yes.
knowing that they're living on. That's their eternal life living on through me, and through my ancestors. They will continue to live on.
What did support look like for you, and what do you wish people understood better about grief?
Support was my wife. It was just go out and, experience it. She said, just take the emotion that you feel and allow that to show itself. So she allowed me to show myself. So support for others, you have to let people experience grief in whatever way they experience it. One of my brothers is living out in Western New South Wales and he just doesn't want to deal with Dad's death. That's his grief mechanism and that's his support mechanism. So that's the thing that is supporting him. Or in my case, it was my wife, Marty. She did a fantastic job. So just allowing me every now and then, I'd say, "I'm going for a walk." And she wouldn't say why or what for or where you're going. She'd go, "Okay, go for a walk," because that's what I needed at the time. And that's the support in that. The thing that I think that people need to understand about grief, or should understand about grief, is that, yeah, it hits people differently, and everybody's response will be different. The wonderful nature of human beings, with our belief systems, with our cultures, with our upbringing, is that we will all experience grief differently, and it will manifest itself differently in every person. So any support network around anyone who's suffered an impact or an episode of grief is to just observe and watch. There's no book, there's no mechanism here, there's no ABC to grief. It'll manifest itself in any way it chooses to. And the best support you can give to people is just to be there. When they cry, be there, listen to them. When they want to listen to loud music, shut the door and let them listen to loud music. When they want to go for a walk, let them go for a walk. And I've done all those things. And Marty and my support network has just said, "Yep, okay, we'll let you sit in your room and listen to loud music for as long as you like. If that helps you get through this process, that's the support that I can give you."
I always like to say that this is something which we are all going to feel, and we are all in this together. So there's a comfort in that this each human being on earth is going to know or knows what this pain is like.
Yeah, absolutely. We will experience it, and we will all experience it differently. It's like love.
Yes.
We experience love differently. So, we don't know who we're going to fall in love with. We don't know who our partner will be in life. We don't know when we'll meet them. But when you find them, it's magical, and grief is the same. You'll experience grief differently. And when you understand it and you look inwardly and understand yourself, that's the great release that you'll be able to survive, I suppose, and move through the grief and deal with the next phase of your life.
Yes. What is something that is very close to your heart, or what is something you feel deeply passionate about?
Animals is something that I feel very deeply passionate about. Creatures that don't have a voice of their own. And I get very upset when I see animals treated cruelly. I've got 6 cats myself. They're all rescue cats from the RSPCA. And in your introduction, you pointed out that I was the CEO of RSPCA. And that's probably a part of my career that has brought me the most joy. I was there for 8 years, and tremendous joy working with a whole bunch of people that were so committed and so interested in animal welfare. And I was able to make such positive changes for animals, not only here in Canberra, but across Australia and across the world. I spoke at an international conference in Washington, D.C. many years ago, and we really laid the foundation for reform in animal welfare, specifically for cats and dogs in Canberra, where I live. And we've got some really great outcomes for those animals, and they're living happy and healthy. But they really bring me joy, and I'm very passionate about animals and animal welfare as it stands. And I'm very interested and curious in how animals are treated around the world, not only here at home, but around the world in that space. So that's something that, brings me a lot of joy, brings me a lot of love. The other thing is music. I love music. I'm a big fan of Pink Floyd and rock and roll from the 70s and 80s. And that brought me a lot of comfort during mum and dad's grieving periods, that I was able to sit in this room where I'm actually talking to you from and listen to some music, and I allowed it to wash over me and brought me a lot of joy and a lot of comfort. And music is something that I really experience because of my eyesight. It's something, the sound and the resonance of music is something that really allows me to experience the world, and I really enjoy that. So it brings me a lot of joy. So sitting in my room with a cat on my lap, listening to some Pink Floyd, that's the ants pants for me.
And I don't know if Rupal told you, but our brother would also, he worked in an animals hospital for a long time, and he worked with rescue animals. And I remember we know how dogs communicate with us, but he would often teach me a little bit about a bird or a bunny. He had bunnies, and he would always point out that they're not like dogs. So you need to learn their communication differently.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's what I say. Dogs have owners. Cats have staff, so they're very different in the way that they so you're looking after your puppy and you're providing all its care. But if your puppy was a cat, it would be saying to you, "Bring me some food. Do this for me. Get me a nice sunny spot to sleep in." You'd be an employee of a cat. And I love our cats. We've got beautiful cats here. They're all rescue cats, all 6 of them, and they curl up on the lounge and they have the run of the house. But they bring you so much joy and so much comfort. Having a pet in your house is a wonderful thing. So that's wonderful to learn that that's where your brother was taking his life, and you've got a beautiful puppy now. So yeah, enjoy the love of an animal. I think it's unconditional, and we don't often experience love like that.
Yes, and I also wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about this cause, which is very important to me, because my dog he's brought so much love into my life after my grief, and came into my life and completely changed my life altogether. And one of the factors which really bothers me is, because I've experienced it where I live, I've spoken to people where people get puppies and dogs and don't know what it entails taking care of them, and then they go and leave them at shelters or they abandon them. So because you worked with animals all your life, I wanted you to talk a little bit about this cause and a little reality check for people who are interested in getting animals and dogs, and how important it is to know that they require a lot of care.
Absolutely. A dog could live for 17, 18, 19 years. So it's a commitment. If you get a puppy, just as you've got 17 years, 18 years ahead of you of caring for
Yes.
something, cleaning up after it, feeding it, taking it to the vet, taking it for walks, making sure it's healthy. It is a very long commitment. And we saw it a lot at RSPCA. People would rush in at Christmas and go, oh, I'm going to get my son or daughter a puppy. And they would adopt the puppy, and 6 months later or 12 months later, they'd be back
Yes.
going, oh, it's too big, it's eating too much, we can't afford it. It's expensive. So we had a dog for 17 years here, my wife and I, beautiful pit bull. We had Dahlia. She was a gorgeous dog, but she had ongoing health issues. She had ongoing skin issues because she lived with cats. She thought she was a cat from time to time, so she'd jump up on the windowsill and fall off and crack her head. Very clumsy dog she was, but we were absolutely committed to looking after her, and probably spent 10, 12,000 Australian dollars a year looking after her health and maintaining it. So if anyone is thinking of getting a puppy, especially in a grieving process, sometimes people will get an animal because they're
Yes.
grieving and they've lost something and they want to replace that. A dog or a
Yes.
cat will never replace a loved one, a partner, a sibling, a parent. That's not the reason to get it. You get an animal because you've got a connection with that animal. And I often say to people, the animal will find you. You won't find the animal. If you go to a shelter
Yes.
and you're looking for an animal, don't just pick one because that's what you want. I want a Labrador, I want a German Shepherd, or I want a Rottweiler. Walk around the shelter and see the animal that finds you. And that's how we found Dahlia. She found us. She was at the shelter, and she came into the office and sat at my desk and sat under my feet and curled up next to me. And then she went to my wife and sat with my wife. We worked at the same place. And we went, oh, this is really cool. But then we were worried we had cats. We thought, oh, how's this dog going to get on with cats? So we introduced the dog to a cat. And the dog, Dahlia, she was scared of cats. And we went, oh, it's perfect. Exactly the type of dog we need. So she found us. We didn't find her. So if you're thinking of getting an animal, yeah, take the time to think about it. I think we spent longer deciding to get Dahlia than we did to renovate our house. That's the decision process that you take. It
Yes.
is not an overnight decision. You don't wake up on a Monday morning going, I'm going to get a puppy, and rush out on Monday afternoon and get a puppy. Your house has to be set up for it. You need a fence, or if you live in an apartment, how you're going to make sure that the animal goes to the toilet properly if you're in an apartment. And lots of people in New York and Washington and Australia live in apartments these days. So are you going to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and take it downstairs to go to the bathroom?
Yes.
Are you going to take it out for walks when it's horrible weather, when it's hot, when it's cold? You've got to think about all those things. And we had all those conversations with people at RSPCA in Australia about making sure that people are absolutely committed to keeping the pet. And we had about a 1% return rate. With all the strategies that I put in place, we reduced the return rate to make sure that animals were going into loving homes forever, which is what we wanted to do. And ultimately, 99 out of 100 animals that we rehomed stayed in their homes, which is a really positive outcome for us. So
Yes.
think about it carefully. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Looking back now, is there any advice you would give your younger self?
That's a really tough question, because right now I'm happy where I am. I'm very happily married, living in a beautiful place in Canberra. So the advice I would give was to my younger self would stay the course. Just do what you've done. I think sometimes if we have regrets in life or we've gone a wrong path, we might want to go back in time and change that decision. I should have been a doctor. And that might be the advice you give your younger self. Or go to medical school if you wanted to be a doctor. But I don't live life with regrets or wanting to change what I've done. We make decisions, and I think every decision we make forms who we are today. And I love who I am today. As I said, I've got a loving wife, a beautiful family, and I'm getting close to, retiring and really enjoying the fruits of the hard work that my father instilled in me. So right now, the advice I would give was just get your head down, continue to follow the path that you're following, and prepare yourself for some grief and some loss in life. Perhaps I could have been better prepared for that. But again, I didn't want to experience, but I'm glad I experienced it in the raw format that I was able to experience it. It's not something you want a full warning for sometimes. But
Yes.
yeah, try not to regret life, and, accept the pathway that you're taking, and make changes now if you're unhappy with where you are, and give yourself some advice today because you can't go back in time in reality. Give yourself some advice today about making a change if you want to change your course, your trajectory, your direction today.
What do you feel the purpose of life is for you, or what do you feel is your personal quest in life?
That's a tough one. We're all here. We've got, as we said, different cultures, different religions. And I think most of us just want to live a happy, healthy, wholesome life. And, my personal quest is that to live wholesomely, to live respectfully, respect others. And I think that's a really big thing with me. Tolerance is probably my personal quest. We're all different. We're all born into this world naked, not knowing anything, and almost identical when we're born. And then life changes us all. And for some reason, we become intolerant to those around us, those of a different colour or a different belief or a different football team. So my personal quest, I suppose, in that space is around tolerance and how do we tolerate those with difference around us. I've lived a life of difference, being vision impaired, and I've been treated cruelly and discriminated against many times in my life. So I just want to see everyone treated fairly, treated with some equity. And as I said, I'm a libertarian. Allow people to live the lives they choose. Don't begrudge it. Don't wish for more. Don't wish for less. Maybe the super wealthy in the world could spread some of their wealth in more interesting places than space travel and stuff like that. But yeah, I've got no control over that or no ability to do anything about that. But day to day, just be respectful and tolerate those who are a little bit different to ourselves.
Is there any book, quote, or philosophy that has shaped your outlook on life?
Yeah, there's a quote that I really live by, and it's expect nothing, do something. 4 words that a wealthy Australian, Russell Crowe, actually, the film actor, said it. He owns the football team that I follow here in Australia, and he bought them about 15 years ago. And one of the things he said to that side at the time was expect nothing, do something about what you do. So that's generally how I live my life these days. I don't expect anything from anyone. I don't put my hand out. I know I have to work hard, and I know I have to do something if I want to change my circumstances. So that's a real important thing that I've got written on my whiteboard in my office, and it's something that I look at every now and then to make sure that we live that way. And 3 or 4 years after he bought the team and had that philosophy in the team, they won the national championships. So I was very pleased that philosophy actually proved itself in a team that hadn't won a competition for over 40 years. So it was very pleasing to the supporters of the South Sydney Rabbitohs at the time, and the philosophy that Russell Crowe brought to the club. So it's something that has resonated with me for a long time.
If it were an ideal world, what does that look like?
Is there an ideal world? I think an ideal world is a different perspective for everyone. Your ideal world is different to mine, is different to someone living in Egypt, is different to someone living in Africa or America or the Middle East right now. It's where people have a little bit of equity and we have a little bit more tolerance for those of difference. I think, as I said, that philosophy that I live, I think that's where we start to see some idealism and some ideality in the world, if we can all just get on a little bit better. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm not cynical and I'm not a pessimist about this, but there's so many people in the world, and the world is so different and so diverse and so wonderful and so horrible all at the same time. Is there an ideal space? My ideal world now is, getting into bed with my wife and waking up the next morning feeling safe and comfortable in a society that is, reasonably comfortable for everyone to live in. That's my definition of an ideal world. But I know it's different for other people and different for others. So again, respecting the differences that we all experience in the world and having a little bit of empathy for those differences, I think, is important. And if, some of our world leaders and most wealthiest had a little bit more empathy, the world might become a little bit more ideal for a few more people.
What is something that you would like the world to know about you, which you feel is often misunderstood?
That I'm not a rock star. I'm vision impaired, and I get out of bed every day and make a cup of tea. That it's not, it's not hard for me. People often see me when I'm out and about with my cane going to a football game or going out to dinner, and they pat me on the back. Oh, well done, Michael. You're doing such a good job. No, I'm not. I'm just living the world that was dealt with me. So I think we think so little of some people with a disability sometimes that it's a miracle that they're able to get out of bed when it's not. We do it every day. I do it every day. You know, I met you through a very wonderful experience meeting your sister Ripple going to Harvard Business School. I'm just doing that the same as 150 other students. You know, it might be a little bit tougher for me to find out whether it's chicken or steak at lunch because I can't see whether it's chicken or steak. And it might take me a little bit longer to read the casework, but nothing I do is miraculous or different. I'm just living in a world with everyone else. So I'd like people to understand and accept that people of difference, whether it's disabled or different cultures, they're living in the same world as you are, and it's not a miracle or miraculous what they're doing in that. Sometimes I think it is, but mostly it's just every day for me.
Thank you so much, Michael. That's very motivational. And something came to my mind, I think, which might help people who go through demotivated times is when I'm sure there must have been times when it must have been hard to do certain things. Did you ever have this thought cross your mind that why am I given this life when everybody else is given something else? For example, why do I have my difficulty level is higher? Why have you ever felt something like that?
No, interesting. I thought the other way. And going to Harvard was very difficult, for me, just to give people perspective. Getting on an aeroplane and navigating international airports when you can't see is horrendous. It's incredibly difficult, but you ask for support, you be vulnerable, and you say to the airline, I can't see, I can't find my aeroplane, can you help me? And the airline invariably helps you. Similarly at Harvard, asking people in my class, can you help me decide whether I get the chicken or the fish because I can't tell which one's chicken and which one's fish. But because of my eyesight, I've also experienced so many different things that people with full sight haven't experienced. I've played sport for my country in 2 different sports, in cricket and 10-pin bowling. I've travelled the world. I've been to the wonderful home country of yours. I've been to India and experienced the culture in India. Had I had full sight, I may not have experienced that, but we went on a cricket tour and we experienced it. And we saw a lot of the world. I've been to South Africa and experienced South Africa. I've stood in Nelson Mandela's cell. If you want an awe-inspiring experience, stand in the cell where Nelson Mandela spent so many years. And I only did that because I was vision impaired, and we got that opportunity because of a cricket tour to South Africa and a special request that we're able to do that. I've sat in the cockpit of a space shuttle at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So not many people get to experience that unless you're an astronaut. But again, that's because I was vision impaired. So all the things that sight loss took away from me, I think the scales have been balanced by the things that I've experienced in my life and that has allowed me to experience. And that brings me joy sometimes. So I never have regretted having bad eyesight. Is it painful and annoying from time to time? Absolutely. When I walk past my wife in the street and don't see her, I get annoyed and frustrated. Where is she? She should be here. When I go to class at Harvard and I can't see the whiteboard, does that frustrate me? Absolutely. But on balance, I'm happy and content in who I am in my life. And I think other people with disability, probably need to think a little bit about this sometimes. And I know people get deeply depressed and deeply upset, or they go through a tragedy in their life and they become depressed. And I accept that. But sometimes you need to look at the balance of your life and the balance of your experiences, take the good with the bad, and try and experience, every day as a fresh new opportunity, which is what I do. I look at each day as an opportunity of, what can I do? What can I, enjoy today, or where will I get joy today? Is it a walk on a beautiful autumn day here in Canberra? Is it doing some Lego? Is it listening to some music? Or is it just sitting with my wife and having a conversation, But, it's, you've got to experience life and not regret the things that you don't have. You can't regret what you've never had, and I've never had full sight, so I can't miss it.
Thank you so much, Michael. I've said this in the past 2 or 3 interviews. Every time I do an interview, every time I am honored to know another story, I take something the guest says, which I feel is a message for me. And what you just said was my message from today. And I'm very thankful.
Thank you.
From your entire journey in life so far, what would you like to share with our listeners that you feel would be helpful to them?
Don't give up. There is always another day. The sun will always come up. And there are dark days, and I've had dark days both with the loss that we've talked about today, when I left RSPCA and couldn't help animals anymore. You know, there's a whole range of things in my life that I've experienced. But every night I've gone to bed, whether that was in tears or whether that was feeling happy or tired or exhausted, however I've gone to bed, I've always woken up the next day and the sun has risen, and I've looked at that and got out of bed and went, okay, let's see what we can experience today. So I think that's what I've learned. That's what my life has taught me, that put one foot in front of the other. You know, every journey starts with that first step. And every journey in your life, whatever that is, whether it's grief, whether it's loss, whether it's disappointment, whether it's depression, there is a pathway out of it, and there is a way to navigate that out. And there are support mechanisms around you. There are professional support mechanisms, and you've got your family and local connections that can help you put that one foot in front of the other, which I've used and I've done. And it's allowed me to, you know, experience in my mind what I believe is, you know, a nice, comfortable life right now.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was my last question, and I'm so grateful that you came today and shared your story, one foot in front of the other.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Summer. Pleasure meeting you. Pleasure meeting your sister. I'm looking forward to re-engaging with your sister shortly again. We had a beautiful dinner in New York, which was fantastic, and we had a really good long conversation about your mother, your brother, my loss. Yeah, you guys are wonderful, and you should be very proud of yourself and your family and what you guys have achieved in your channel. You're doing a wonderful thing here for lots and lots of people. So I'm honoured to be part of it. I'm very pleased that we've had a wonderful conversation today, and I thank you.